Hello, welcome to today's talk where we're going to talk about the divorce process and navigating it with my friend Sandra Radna, who is an amazing divorce attorney in New York City. She focuses on high conflict divorces, has been practicing for many years, and is also the author of this great new book, You're Getting Divorced, Now What? Sandra, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I love the book, and I just wanted to start with asking you, the very first chapter is not at all about the law, it's about emotions. You talk about fear, shame, sadness, or just being pissed off. Why did you find that that was an important way to start the book?
When most people find themselves, and thank you so much for asking this question, because when people realize that they're actually getting divorced, not just thinking about it, but when that reality hits them, that either they were served with papers or they know that they feel that they have no choice if they're going to get divorced now, they have this deer in the headlight moment where they're, okay, what do I do? And then after that, they have all of these emotions. And the fear could be, am I losing all the friends that my spouse and I have been friends with all of these years with? And the guilt could be, one of my poor children, what's going to happen to my children? And how come I couldn't make this work? And the sadness could be, even if it's their decision, sadness could be about the life that they thought they were going to have, but they're not having anymore. And the pissed off is like, sometimes the spouse feels like I gave all my best and this is what I get in return. And a lot of that happens with infidelity, is a lot of the anger that happens. So the reason I wrote that is that it's very hard to plan when you are blind with rage, or you can't see through your tears, or you're racked with guilt, or any of the emotions that people feel, and you could feel one or all of them. So what I do with the book, as you know, I have some forms that go with it that are clickable, downloadable forms, or you could just print them out. And I just tell people to try to identify that emotion and why you're feeling it. And the book is by no means a psychology book, but I think that once you identify those emotions, you can put them aside so that you can plan. And planning is one of the most important parts for a divorce that has an outcome that looks like what you're.
So, what should an initial plan focus on, in your opinion, once the decision is made to divorce?
It's very rudimentary in the beginning. The initial plan is just, where am I going to live? Who are my children going to live with? What are my expenses and how much money do I need to live on when I start living this separate life? And it sounds like common sense, but when you, again, are a deer in the headlight, you're not thinking of all of these things. It just feels overwhelming. You feel like you have this avalanche of all these decisions to make, but it really comes down to those few things. Where am I going to live? Who are my children going to live with? And how much money do I need to live on? Those are the initial things that you need to know.
And then, obviously, once you've decided that, we would both agree that it's important to consult a lawyer. How did you come up with the list of things that people should be looking for in a lawyer?
Well, I thought about a number of things. I thought about the process that I do, and I thought about what my clients say to me if they're switching attorneys, what they were unhappy with. And usually the things that people are unhappy with is that the attorney didn't return their phone calls. They felt that they weren't being listened to, that their objectives weren't being met. So choosing a lawyer, sorry to use this cliche, is kind of like a marriage, right? You have to pick the right person because your personality is different from somebody else's personality. And an attorney that might have been good for your friends might not be good for you. So what I did in the book is I made a couple of checklists for people to use. One, when they're just calling for an attorney, making those phone calls in the beginning. And the second, for when you actually meet with the attorney. And things that you're looking for are things that you might not necessarily think about, but were they kind? Was the office staff kind to you on the phone? Did they listen to what you had to say without interruption? Did they take your information? Did they sound professional on the phone, or did they push you off? And then when you meet with the attorney, did the attorney let you speak? Did they interrupt you while you were talking? Were they rude to you while you were there? Did they seem distracted and doing something else while they were speaking to you? And then importantly, did they seem knowledgeable about the issues that you're talking about? Because the issues in divorce, there's so many issues. They could be financial issues, issues involving the children, issues involving maybe substance abuse or domestic abuse by your spouse, or mental illness, or a child with special needs. And when you're speaking with the attorney, they should seem knowledgeable enough to be able to say, here's the plan, or here's what we would do in this situation. And if they're not, that's probably not the best fit for you, no matter how nice they are. So maybe they check one of the boxes. Maybe they're really, really nice, but they just don't seem to have the knowledge for the issues that you have. That might not be the best person for you. You really need the whole package.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree. So you have a great chapter on how to tell the kids, and then you have this NBC rule. Can you explain the NBC rule?
Yes. And I wanted to make that something memorable. So NBC obviously is the channel NBC, so people might remember that. But really, it's so important during a divorce to not put your children in the middle of the divorce. And people do it unwittingly. They don't mean to do it. Some people do it intentionally, but most people don't do it intentionally. So NBC means don't say anything negative about the other parent while you're talking to your child. And don't blame the other parent for things that are going on, such as, I'd be able to buy that for you, but your father doesn't give us enough money. And the C is, don't speak with your child about the court case, even if your child is a teenager, even if you think your child can handle it. The reason is because your child, no matter how old they are, needs to be free to be able to love both parents without being in the middle of all of your issues with your spouse. So when you tell the child about what's going on in the court case, all of a sudden, they feel like, I don't know, they might feel that dad made mom have to go to court to do what he should have been doing anyway. Or maybe I should be mad at dad, or maybe I should be mad at mom because why is she taking dad to court, or whatever it is. And it makes them have feelings that they might not express, but will affect them later on in life. And at the end of the day, all we want is happy children who can grow up to be happy, well-adjusted adults. And by using NBC, not saying anything negative, not blaming the other parent when you're talking about the child, not talking about court, you're giving your child the best chance to survive your divorce without the battle scars.
That makes perfect sense. I also like the chapter you have about judges, because I feel like people have really unrealistic expectations about the judges. And I love how you incorporate actual quotes from people who've been through the experience. So can you just give us some highlights about your best advice for what to expect with a judge?
Well, what's very interesting is when people go to court, they feel like the judge see that they were the best parent to their children. They're a good person. They might be on the PTA. They might be coaching their kids' teams, their sports teams. And they think the judge should just see that, and they should see that their spouse is a horrible, rotten person that the judge should not be paying any attention to. But what happens is the judge looks at everybody on an even playing field, no matter how bad you think your spouse is. And that's very shocking to people. And the other thing is, the judge might seem a little bit abrupt when they're speaking to the client. So you go there, and in pre-COVID world, you'd be in a crowded courtroom. Other people might be listening to what's happening. And you go there and you've been waiting for this court date, and you think that everything's going to be, you're going to get to tell your whole story. But actually at that first court date, not too much happens. The attorneys do the talking. They explain what's going to be, what the case is about, which is how old your children are, how long you've been married, just very nuts and bolts type of things. And you might not get a chance to talk at all. And it's very unsatisfying, that first court appearance, because they don't feel like they were heard the same way. Now, some judges are very kind and will have a talk with the people when they come in, but that's not usually what happens. It's usually just a very quick thing. And I think what people what serves them the best is to understand that it's a long game, not a short game. You know, that you will get the justice that you need over a number of court appearances, maybe not on the first court appearance. If you can settle with your spouse before that, obviously that's the best situation. But if you have a litigated divorce, it'll probably take a number of court appearances before you get the results that you deserve. And one of the things that I talk about in the book is how to give the information to your attorney, or what information your attorney needs so they can advocate for you strongly, more satisfying court appearance, because the attorney can only advocate for you if you give them the information that they require in order to do that. And
Right.
that's the other thing I try to help people to understand.
Right. I also like that you talk about, being realistic about the cost. Like there's the one story you have about the man who spent $5,000 fighting over a ladder that was only worth $250. Right? It's hilarious, but we all have those stories, right? Because people get lost in like fighting over this one issue without looking at the cost of that battle.
Yeah, and because it wasn't about the ladder.
Right.
It's always about
The principle.
what happens during a litigated divorce is that people feel like they're making all of these concessions, and they're giving in to their spouse for this, and they're giving in to spouse for that. And they usually get to that one thing. In that case, it was the ladder, where they say, you know what? I gave too much. I'm not giving them that. I'm keeping that ladder. And unfortunately, the realization that you have to have, it's a lot of concessions, because at the end of the day, you just want to be finished with your divorce with what's fair. So in that case, we went all the way to court about the ladder. The wife didn't need the ladder. My client needed the ladder for work. And when we finally got in front of the judge, she said, "How much does the ladder cost?" And when we told her, she was like, "Forget the ladder. Like, we're not going to fight about the ladder."
Right.
And the client needed to hear it from the judge, because no matter how many times I told him, it was the point of the matter. So that really comes back to putting your emotions aside. When you're feeling so angry, maybe you're not making the best decision. And if that same client was hearing that about somebody else, he probably would have said, "Look, just forget about the ladder." But because it was him, and because it was through this contentious, litigation that he was going through with his wife, it was just too hard for him to be able to do that, until the judge, almost slapped him in the face with reality and said, "Stop it." Almost like that movie with Cher. What was that movie? Where she slaps him and says,
Moonstruck?
Yeah, Moonstruck.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that. And sometimes that's what they need, but
Yeah.
it's difficult when you're in the middle of it to really understand what you should be fighting about and what you shouldn't be fighting about. And that's where your relationship with your attorney comes in. If you choose the right attorney and you have an attorney, you have a good relationship, that communication that you have with your attorney is important, because when your attorney says to you, "This isn't one we should fight about. Let's save our battles for something that's more important to the outcome of your divorce." And if you trust that attorney, you're going to take that advice. So I had a very good relationship with this client, but that was the one thing that he didn't want to give up. But it does help to have the discussion.
Yeah. Well, the book is great. Where can people find this book?
They can find it at Amazon, where you find everything else, Amazon.com. You're Getting Divorced Now What? Just remember the apostrophe and YOU''RE. Or you can just search by my name, Sandra Radna, Radna. I only wrote one book so far, so it's easy to find.
Okay. And if people want to contact you, what's the best way to reach you?
You can go to my website, which is www.radnalaw.com. Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And here's all the information. Yes, and there's my phone number. Thank you so much, Regina. 212-749-8187. Thank you, Regina.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for doing this today. It's been awesome.
So much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.